Just before leaving this world, Pope Francis broke the silence, not with a bang, but with this soft, firm voice that carries the weight of long-silenced truths. What he revealed was not a simple confession. It was a spiritual jolt, a forbidden key that opened a door that the Vatican had kept sealed for decades. A secret so disturbing it could have shaken the faith of millions. The world was not prepared. At least that's what we were told in 1960. But today the veil is torn. This forgotten message, kept in the shadows, returns to the light. This is the third secret of Fatima, a whisper from heaven, entrusted to 3 innocent children, but intended for all humanity. And in his last moments, Francisco decided to no longer hide what heaven had silently shouted. What you are about to hear is not a story. This is not a lost prophecy. It is a truth that hits your heart. And if you feel emotion, it is because you are already entering this mystery. In a quiet corner of Portugal called Fatima, something extraordinary happened in 1917. 3 shepherd children, Lucy, Francisco, and Jacinta, guard their church during an encounter that will mark their souls forever. It was May 13th. Under a heavy sky of divine mystery, a woman dressed in white appears, brighter than the sun. It was the Virgin Mary, carrying an urgent message for humanity. What she shared with them would be, in part, one of the greatest mysteries in modern church history. The third secret of Fatima. During the following months, the Virgin appeared to them again every May 13th, until October of that same year. Why did you choose 3 such humble children? Entrust them with such a transcendent message? Perhaps because simple bodies accept the truth of heaven better. Since the first appearance, the messages have contained dire warnings for the future of humanity. They spoke of suffering, of war, of the pain that distances man from God. But they also offered hope, conversion, and mercy. However, not everything has been revealed to the world at this time. Part of the message remained secret for many years, surrounded by silence and surrounded by conjecture. During the first apparitions, the Virgin showed what we today call the first and second secrets. In the first, the children had a terrifying vision of hell, souls on fire, surrounded by demons, in indescribable suffering. The image was so incredible that Francisco and Jacinta dedicated themselves since then to a life of prayer and sacrifice for the salvation of sinners. Lucy, who lived longer than them, confided that the screams heard in this vision accompanied her all her life. The message was clear: pain has eternal consequences, and the world must urgently return to God. The second secret contained a prophecy about the times to come. The Virgin stated that if humanity did not repeat itself, there would be a war worse than the First World War. His words were fulfilled in the tragedy of World War II. He also asked for the consecration of Russia to his Immaculate Heart to prevent the spread of communism, which would cause persecution against Christians and the distancing of many hearts from the truth. These 2 secrets already have immense spiritual impact, but it is the third secret that has created the most concern, doubts, and debate. According to testimonies, the third secret was entrusted to the Church with the indication of making it public in 1960. But at that time, the Vatican decided not to reveal it. The official reason was that the world was not yet ready to understand his message in all its dimensions. This decision fueled even more theories. Some believed that the secret spoke of the end of the world, global calamities, or even a deep crisis within the Church. The silence only aroused fears. Clerical figures, such as Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano and Cardinal Silvio Otti, suggested that the content was so surprising that it could shake the hearts of many believers. But then, what truth was so delicate that it had to be preserved for more than 50 years? In this context, Pope Francis, shortly before giving himself into the arms of the Lord, once again shed light on this mystery. With simple words, he remembered that the message of Fatima was not only for the past, but for us today. He spoke of a world that has distanced itself from the love of God, of a humanity wounded by indifference, by wars, and by the loss of this sacredness. And in this last call, he reminded us that the true miracle of Fatima is the conversion of the heart. Each word of the Virgin continues to resonate strongly, an invitation to return to the gospel, to pray with fervor, to dedicate one's life to what remains eternal. The secret that has been hidden for so many years is no longer hidden. He is before us, in the reality we live, waiting for our response. As the years passed, more and more people began to wonder if we were already seeing these prophecies being fulfilled before our eyes, and if the Church was finally preparing to reveal the rest of the occult message. The last apparition, which took place on October 13, 1917, was accompanied by a miraculous sign presented by tens of thousands of people. Known as the Miracle of the Sun, it took place on a rainy day, before a crowd of more than 70,000 witnesses. Suddenly, the sun appears to rotate in the sky, emitting different colored lights and descending as if approaching the earth. Believers and skeptics alike looked on with surprise. Even journalists of the time, despite their initial reservations, were forced to report on the numerous witnesses gathered. For many, this was the definitive confirmation that the apparitions were authentic. However, what was not fully understood was the spiritual depth of this manifestation. It was not just a miracle that marked the sight, but an urgent call to wake up. The Virgin announced that difficult times were approaching, and yet, through perseverance in action and prayer, the darkness that loomed over humanity could be overcome. Pope Francis, on several occasions, reflected on the tenderness of Mary's heart and turned his gaze to the message of Fatima, not as a distant memory, but as a living invitation to conversion. In his personal meditations, Francis saw these announcements not as precious testimonies, but as signs of God's mercy, a call to awaken the soul before it is too late. Today, more than 100 years later, this call continues to touch hearts. The message remains valid as a spiritual crossroads that invites each soul to choose its path responsibly. But the mystery continues. What does the third secret really contain? Does it speak directly to the tribulations of our time? The story of Fatima raises a profound question. Have we prepared ourselves to face the truth? These revelations are not pedantic narratives to entertain believers. They are warning campaigns affected by the sky itself. The Virgin did not come to sow fear, but to offer an opportunity, a moment of grace before the doors open. There is time to respond. In this hour, more than ever, we are called to listen. The first and second secrets of Fatima form the basis of a message so urgent that even today its weight has not diminished. Sent in 1917 to 3 shepherd boys, the secrets revealed truths that would shock the conscience of the modern world. The first secret took place between earth and eternity. Lucy, Francisco, and Jacinta witnessed a vision of hell. They saw an illuminated landscape full of tormented souls, greeted by demonic and horrible figures. Lucy would later claim that this vision remained etched in her memory forever. Jacinta, touching her lips, began to offer daily sacrifices for sinners. Francis, deeply shocked but silent, found solace in contemplative prayer. The message was direct. Hell is not a metaphor or a closed theory. It is a spiritual reality that is presented to those who distance themselves from God. The Virgin exhorted them to pray fervently, to offer penance for the lost, and to carry prayer as a brake against evil. This appeal was addressed only to the hills of Portugal, but to the entire world. In a time of famine and widespread spiritual apathy, humanity was drifting away from the Spirit of God. The second secret brought a worldview of upheaval. The Virgin stated that if the world did not repent and return to God, another war would occur, much worse than the first. And that's what happened. In 1939, the world was drawn into World War II. But the message does not end there. The Virgin spoke of Russia, a land destined for the origin of an ideology that did not accept God and that sought to extinguish the flame of hunger. She wept for his dedication to her Immaculate Heart, telling him that if it was not done, communism would spread, causing destruction to morality, religious freedom, and the dignity of the soul. History has witnessed this warning. Communism spread, reaching many countries and suffocating the church in many regions. The 20th century witnessed the arrival of regimes that attempted to silence the voice of God through violence and persecution. Within the church, debate arose over whether the consecration had been carried out as desired. Pope Pius X carried out an act of consecration in 1942, although some thought he did not understand Mary's instructions given the impossibility of unified action by the world's bishops. It was not until 1984 that Pope John Paul II, in the midst of great international tension, carried out a solemn act of global consecration. Shortly after, the Soviet system began to collapse, ending with the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. The seriousness of these first two secrets can no longer be ignored. Heaven spoke, but humanity, for the most part, did not want to listen. Many have dismissed the visions as legends or myths, but history does not lie. These children, innocent and without formal education, predicted events that were beyond human understanding. Is it possible to explain such a vision without recognizing divine intervention? In any case, the most profound of these messages was not political, but spiritual. Maria did not come to learn geopolitics, but to ask for reconciliation. He indicated prayer, especially the Rosary, devotion to his Immaculate Heart, and penance as trucks that move away from the abyss and lead us towards mercy. The heart of Fatima's message is not fear, but hope. The salvation of the soul does not depend on destiny, but on our response. The call resonates in each of us. Live carefully, act with love, and pray with pride. And although the third part of the secret remains a mystery, the question is getting stronger. Will we be prepared when the truth is revealed? When the Church decided, in 1960, not to fully reveal the content of the third secret of Fatima, not only questions arose, but also a wave of conjectures that did not disappear at all. In quiet meetings and worry-laden conversations, many wondered, what could be more disturbing than going to bed for the proud? Some thought that the Vatican feared a panic reaction, while others thought that the root of the matter was much deeper, a storm of pride that hit the bowels of the Church. The ambiguous answers and the disappearances of bishops and prayers only intensified the mystery. However, amid all these doubts, the call to prayer and to stop remained bright like a lamp lit in the middle of the night. Francis reflected more than once on the nature of secrets within the Church. For him, these are not questions to be deciphered, but rather moments that touch the soul with a weight that is not always linked to a single era. The mystery of Fatima, according to his vision, was not only a prophecy, but also a mirror before the human heart. He spoke of the need for silence, not as a refuge from fear, but as a sacred space where discernment finds its breath. Decades later, Sister Lucia, one of the visitors, expressed her anguish on paper, obeying what he had asked of her with a heart stunned by what she had seen. This document arrived at the Vatican with a precise indication. It was supposed to be published in 1960. But when that year arrived, there was silence. The surprise was widespread. Why hide something that supposedly came from heaven? Could there be any message more stubborn than the wars, persecutions, or bloodshed of the 20th century? In the absence of clarity, everything comes to light as theories. Some speak of a global disaster, others of an internal rupture in the soul of the Church. Finally, in 2000, during the pontificate of John Paul II, the Vatican published a version of the secret that described a vision: a bishop dressed in white walking through the ruins and finally being attacked by a soldier. Many have interpreted this image as an allusion to the attack on the Pope in 1981, a fact that he himself considered that the Virgin had gone astray. As a sign of gratitude, he consecrated the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Still, the concern has not disappeared. This vision seemed incomplete, with symbols that were disturbing but could not be explained. Theologians and prayers asked, "Is there anything left that is not revealed?" Among them, voices like that of the late Malachi Martin claimed that there were even more. A warning about a spiritual collapse that would begin at the same level as the Church. Others suggested that the secret spoke of a world that was losing its sense of truth, attracted by relativism, where the flame of authentic truth is extinguished by the wind of time. Lucia herself hinted in her later writings that the gravest threat was not war or disaster, but sin, that alienation of the soul from God. For her, the real battle of Fatima was spiritual. It was not a conflict between nations, but a fight of the spirit. The Virgin did not come to get away from fear, but to ask for fidelity. He asked for the rosary, sacrifice, lives dedicated to grace. Without real conversion, he said, the world would sadly waste the consequences of its decisions. Francis, whose devotion to Mariana was visible in every step of his pontificate, echoed these calls. He often spoke to the Church of the risk of a church imprisoned by the globality of wavering rites, of a pride that forgets its fire. In 2017, on the centenary of the apparition of Fatima, he placed himself in the hands of Mary, entrusting his pontificate to her protection. He did so not as a figure of power, but rather as a pilgrim seeking light in times of darkness. For those who carefully observe the signs of the times, his words sound like confirmation. But the question remains, is what he showed in 2000 true, or is there still a dormant part in the archives of Rome waiting for its moment? Some argue that the Church is biding its time to protect the proud from the fearful. Others believe that the secret has already disappeared and that we are experiencing its fulfillment. What is clear is this: the third secret is not simply a document kept in the Vatican archives, it is a spiritual calling. The Virgin did not come to scare, but to invite. His message, like the gospel, is not born of judgment, but of mercy. He asks us to choose, to wake up from indifference, to leave consolation, and return to the heart of Christ. Beyond whether or not there will be new revelations, perhaps the big question is this: our hearts are prepared to receive what the sky whispers. Francis was the one who, step by step, prepared the ground for a revelation that, for a long time, remained embedded in the heart of the Church. In his years as Bishop of Rome, he highlighted a theme that runs throughout his pontificate: the silence of indifference must end. A world in crisis cannot sustain itself with free hunger. In this context, Francis, the son of an immigrant railroad worker, spoke with rare clarity about the corrosive effects of materialism, the cold spread of global apathy, and the disappearance of Christian values in a society seduced by secularism. He is not afraid to point out what he considers crucial evidence for the Church: a spiritual erosion that does not come from the outside, but from within. The fact that many are collapsing, not in distant lands, but within the walls of the sanctuary. For some, these warnings resonate like the echo of this mystery that has touched generations, the third secret of Fatima. Studies and believers have long linked the idea of a great apostasy, an internal collapse of the fact, even among the clergy, with the vision revealed to the pastors in Portugal. According to this interpretation, the danger is found not only in disbelief, but in failure, in leaders who get lost along the way, in truth stripped of comfort, and in a gospel that lives only in form but not in fervor. More than once his words came close to the edge of prophecy. In a homily, he spoke of hell's interest in separating pastors from their courts. In another, he affirmed a form of Christ-empty Christianity, where tradition survives without transformation and ritual is maintained without a true relationship with the Lord. These reflections were profound, especially among those who consider the apparitions of the Virgin Mary as a divine call to vigilance of the heart. The tribulations that she announced seem, for many, to become more and more a reality in the current life of the Church. The images of a pope suffering with bishops and lay people in the face of persecution or even death no longer seem close or symbolic. They feel like the essence of something that is already among us. And yet there are those who maintain that the core of the message has not yet been fully revealed. The official publication of the year 2000 cannot contain the whole truth. Some whisper that there is still a final part, perhaps held back by caution, or perhaps by fear. In the midst of this uncertainty, many eyes turn to Francis. Will he be the one chosen to reveal the whole truth? Some voices in the Vatican have discreetly hinted as much. Even Cardinal Tarcísio Bertone, who participated in the 2000 publication, was singled out for allegedly withholding essential details. Rumors of a second part of the secret have not disappeared. If anything, they are getting stronger as the world collapses under the weight of its own crises. This time, it's not peace. There are many signs: wars that do not stop, economies that move away, the earth that is hollowing out under environmental collapse, and new diseases that challenge our resistance. For those who remain proud of the message of Fatima, none of this is coincidental. These are warnings. The Virgin announced that if there was no conversion, suffering would fall upon humanity. Francis stood firm on the wall, insisting on prayer, on repentance, on the return of the heart to God. He increasingly remembered that true peace is born from reconciliation, not from politics, from the abandonment of the soul to God, not from the government's decision. The Virgin, the consecration to the Immaculate Heart, a life of penitence, are not relics of the past. They are remedies for the present. However, within the Church itself, the internal wounds deepen. Scandals that undermine trust, doctrinal divisions that grow, political tensions that cause confusion. Some accuse Francis of allowing too much freedom. Others criticize him for not having made enough progress. This Virgin reflects a deeper struggle, a spiritual purification perhaps announced long ago. Some believe that the Church is now walking through the valley of its own purification. And in the midst of everything, Francisco remains like a shepherd who does not look at victory, but at fidelity. He does not speak to generate fear, but to awaken hope. The Mother of Christ did not come to attract her children, but to offer them refuge. Through each Marian pilgrimage and each Hail Mary, the Pope has affirmed that prayer is the strength of the Church. In particular, the prayer is simple, repetitive, but with the power to change the course of history. The time will come to speak more directly about the secret. Maybe what we are waiting for is not a document, but a decision, to live as if we know everything. The silence that surrounds the third secret cannot be an omission, but rather an invitation to prepare the soul, to awaken from lethargy, to believe that God does not hide a truth, but rather gives time to return. Because in the end, perhaps, the greatest secret is not what remains to be revealed, but what each heart must decide to believe. The message has already been sent. The call to return to the path of conversion, constant prayer, and firm trust in God's divine plan remain at the center of everything as the opportunity for great revelation arises. The question is not whether we are ready to receive it, but whether we have responded to the call that Mary made more than 100 years ago. When meditating on these words, it is impossible not to remember the deep spiritual concern expressed so many times by Francis, who sees himself not only as a doctrinal guide, but as a pilgrim who walks with humanity in prophetic times. His presence, calm but firm, resonates in the spiritual tension that unites the revelations of Fatima with the destiny of the world. And it is in the depths of this silence where the faith that Francis announces shines most clearly. The announcement pronounced by the Virgin Mary continues to resonate with an urgent tone and at the same time full of tenderness. Since the apparitions of Fatima in 1917, her voice has transcended time, not only to a past century, but projecting forward with a vigilance that becomes more intense every day. Endless wars, natural disasters, global plagues, attacks on those who maintain their pride. All of this is presented as signs, like lights lit in the middle of a storm, of a spiritual turmoil that accelerates the entire world. But what did Mary ask of us? Why do his words weigh so much on the consciousness of the present? In the middle of his message, there is a painful truth. The human soul distances itself from its creator. In this distance, the soul is exposed, wounded by fear, weak by indifference. The apparition spoke clearly of the need for a profound conversion of the soul, of a return to the rhythm of prayer and the redemptive act of penance. Without these practices, Soul said, fear would recede like a beach, affecting not only people, but also the structures of societies and governments. The Virgin anticipated a time in which faith would be eclipsed, not only by external persecution, but also by an internal erosion of moral clarity and Christian values. In the midst of the moral flourishing we are experiencing today and growing secularization, the warnings that were announced some time ago are clearly reflected. The loss we face is not only doctrinal, but deeply human. Marie's words were not enlightening. He pointed out a danger that was not only coming from outside the church, but was also brewing within, a spiritual crisis that would reach even the highest levels of his leadership. Many theologians have reflected on the appeal of the third secret of Fatima, partially revealed in the year 2000, suggesting that it is this inner test, a spiritual death more lacerating than the sword. The image of a pope surrounded by martyrs climbing a devastated hill can symbolize not only bloody persecution, but also the prevention of the event caused by indifference and betrayal. It is not just about geopolitical events or external threats to the institution. It is a struggle for the soul where relativism, attachment to ego, and abandonment of a gospel-centered life threaten to dissolve the sacred. Mary's warnings are not limited to the walls of the church. They affect nations and people by announcing wars and disasters, not as punishments, but as consequences, natural fruits of a world that has rejected the loving authority of God. Last year, these consequences were seen in an unpleasant way. The world wars, the rise of tyrants, and the blood silently erased by countless persecuted Christians. And despite everything, Mary did not come to announce the condemnation but rather illuminated the way home. He promised that through daily prayer of the Rosary and sincere dedication to his heart, the path of suffering could be transformed. This dedication is not a gesture motivated by fear, but an act of trust, a way of putting all life in the hands of divine mercy. His call also resonated in other recognized apparitions, such as those in Akita and Medjugorje, reminding us that this invitation is not isolated, but a constant smile from heaven. The Rosary, so often underestimated as a simple repetition, is actually a chain of graces, united hearts, strengthens families, protects people. There is no terror in Marie's voice, but only the grateful tenderness of a mother calling to her children to keep them away from danger. His warning does not seek to paralyze but to awaken, because the destiny of the world does not depend solely on governments or crises, but on the silent decision that each soul makes deep in its heart. When humanity closes its life to God, it opens the door to confusion and chaos. But even in the midst of darkness, those who humbly seek God find a peace that the world cannot destroy. Francis always insisted that this peace is not passive, it is active. It was born from a church that emerges from the encounter, that does not close itself in its comfort, but embraces the wounded, the forgotten, the suffering. His vision of a living gospel expressed in works of mercy and solidarity reflects the same call to authenticity that Mary made to us. Because for him, consciousness and conversion are not an abstract concept. It is something real, visible, concrete. He is the brother dressed as an excluded person who welcomed the unjust system questioned in the name of Christ and without prayer, Francis repeated many times. We do not have the strength to face the challenges of this time. Some today wonder if through repentance, prayer, and works of love the world can still change. But this transformation depends on our response to your response. Fatima's call resonates today with the same clarity as in 1917. Mary invites us to get off the bicycle and see the world not only as it appears, but as it really is. A spiritual battlefield, a vineyard waiting for workers, a place where the light can still shine in the darkness. The signs should not be ignored, but they should not lead to despair either. The decision is now. The time has come. Although the world trembles, God's mercy continues to fade. What Mary asks of us is not complicated. It requires hearts that trust, hands that persevere, and lives that love. In this response lives the only light capable of dispelling darkness. And if there is still evidence of coming to church that finds us not asleep, but in prayer. In the last stage of his reflections, Pope Francis shared a serene concern not as a warning launched from the balconies, but as a painful truth heard for years walking with those who carry wounds in their souls. He did not speak with alertness, but with the gravity of a pope who knows the weight of silence within the church. In his understanding, the ethical confusion of our days and the loss of reflection on the sacraments are not isolated phenomena. These are the visible signs of a deeper division, a silent apostasy that, according to Francis, begins not externally but internally when those who have received the gospel begin to shape it to meet the winds of culture. Francis often pointed out this temptation to present a liberated pride in his cross reduced to a cultural formality. The symbolism contained in the third secret of Fatima resurfaces with warm force in this scenario. The white-robed bishop, long interpreted as a representation of the Pope, advances through the remains of a ruined city, falling over the bodies of priests and proud victims of abandonment and violence. Although some have linked this vision to the attack on John Paul II, others affirm that it goes far beyond an isolated event that shows a spiritual death in progress, a slow and painful purification of the Church where hunger is at the limit of the test. This is not an invention. Mystics like Padre Pio and Maria Valtorta have spoken before of a church wounded not only by external attacks, but also by betrayals from within itself. From Aquitaine to Fatima, the apparitions of the Virgin Mary built a chain of heavenly calls full of urgency. In Aquitaine, his words were aggressive, bishops against bishops, cardinals against each other. Not a church just accused, but destroyed by its own members. This continuity over time is not for many a coincidence, but rather a prophetic line that announces a necessary test before the promised victory. In the midst of this evidence, Pope Francis called not for panic, but for discernment. The real danger is not the fire that falls from the sky, but the passive acceptance of a form of Christianity without sacrifice, an empty spiritual life reduced to appearance. And yet, even in the midst of chaos, there is hope. Amid the cries of division, some believe that Francis has filled the gap, facing forces that seek to divide the faith, although others accuse him of fostering ambiguity. Regardless of their opinion, few deny that his pontificate has been marked by an internal struggle that reflects the greater crisis already foretold. The great evidence is not limited to the walls of the church. As a result, in many places around the world, Christians are imprisoned, tortured, and killed. In the West, religion has been marginalized, replaced by an ideology that offers reconciliation without truth, freedom without holiness. Secularism is advancing rapidly, not only as indifference, but also as an active force that will combat the soul's longing for the eternal. This is also part of the spiritual battle that Mary announced, a fight for the heart of humanity. And always, in the midst of darkness, the light of Fatima remains lit. Mary's voice does not cry out with despair, but with firm love. Don't be afraid. His call to prayer, especially to pray the rosary, is always a failure in the face of the approaching darkness. The promise lives on. In the midst of doing and perseverance, your immaculate heart will triumph. It is not the end, but the beginning of a profound renewal that is born between fire and tears. At this time, we are invited to respond. We are prepared for the test that is approaching. Let us recognize in the global disorder the signs that have been announcing themselves for so long. Wars are increasing. Natural disasters are becoming more frequent and destructive, accelerating our certainties and raising questions that few people seem to express. Is this the world that Mary told us not to return to God? The signs seem too clear to ignore. He announced that while humanity would persist in its sovereignty, the earth itself would die in pain. And that's what's happening. Earthquakes, hurricanes, floods are not simply natural phenomena, but signs that all creation suffers from man's rebellion against his Creator. In Aquitaine, Marie's words were forceful. Fire will fall from heaven and many will lose their lives. Symbolic or not, these images awaken a deep urgency in the soul. However, spiritual affliction is not limited only to the natural environment, but also to the governments that oppose it, to the ideologies that separate them, and to societies so fragmented that even within the same family there is no longer a common moral language. The battle prophesied by Mary is not only external, it is also internal, released in the conscience of each person. The modern world, in its desire for autonomy, seems increasingly distant from divine truth. Relativism has become a dominant belief, and with it, the human mind is drifting away from its spiritual life. As pandemics and famine continue to spread suffering, the voice of the poor grows stronger, and through it all, Mary's words continue to resonate, calling each of us, not with a sound, but with the constant noise of a mother who does not abandon her children. In the last years of his life, Francis often reflected on the silent suffering that had fallen on the world, like a dense snow. In recent global crises, particularly the COVID-19 pandemic, he saw not only a reminder of our human fragility, but also a revelation of the selfishness and indifference that persists in our societies. These are not simply health emergencies, but spiritual awakenings, moments that have allowed us to see just how human our Creator is. Meditating on this evidence, Francis always returns to the prophetic voice of Mary, whose words, and although in the West, this persecution takes on other faces, restrictive laws, cultural changes, great hostility towards religion, its effect is also devastating. The slow erosion of religious freedom and the marginalization of Christian values is weakening the Church at its core. This silent rejection, this growing apostasy, is what Mary predicted as one of the greatest challenges to the Church in its darkest hours. And yet, even in this darkness, the light of hope has never been extinguished. In 1906, in a world wounded by pain and evil, the message of Fatima was not only an alarm but also a promise of mercy. The promise was clear and profound. If we return to God through prayer, penance, and sincere consecration to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, it is possible to move forward in destruction. Among the gifts that Mary offered to her children, the rosary shone especially brightly. These were not simply threadbare beads, but a stop to despair, a rhythm of peace in the midst of chaos. The testimonies of lives transformed, of tragedies avoided, of blessings received, are incomprehensible, all thanks to the proud recitation of this prayer. Marie assured us that her heart would triumph. This promise, which has been whispered and proclaimed throughout generations, continues to be a light to those who walk in darkness. However, some wonder if what we are experiencing today is the full complement of these prophecies, or simply the beginning of something greater. The Church, with its knowledge, invites us to discern, not to despair. Pope Francis has often emphasized the need for mature pride, not marked by fear, but tempered by trust. He encourages believers to remain vigilant, steadfast in prayer, without giving in to panic. Mary's apparitions do not seek to scare, but to awaken. They are a call to spiritual sobriety, to elevate the ephemeral gaze towards the eternal. The signs of the times are not hidden. They manifest themselves in the possessors, in the laws that are enacted, in the loss of the moral sense. But Maria did not leave us adrift. She gave us a path, a conversion, a prayer, a charity. In a world accelerated by uncertainty, the proud are called to make lights that do not go out, living witnesses of the presence of God. Fatima is not a story of fatalism, but a song that calls us to renewal, that drives us to inner transformation. If we accept this call with courage and devotion, we can still witness the glorious triumph of grace and peace that no human power can provide. The Rosary and the consecration to the Immaculate Heart of Mary are not memories of the past, but spiritual pillars for this generation and those to come. Mary's song in 1917 continues to resonate today. His invitation to daily prayer and to entrust him with our homes and our hearts is as urgent today as then. Consecrating oneself to Mary is not simply repeating words, but giving life to her maternal care. It is deciding to live under his support, always walking towards Christ. Mary's heart will triumph. She herself promised it. But this triumph requires our yes, our cooperation, our sincere desire to be transformed. Throughout the centuries, saints have testified to the fruits of this offering: the courage that inspires, the grace that multiplies, and the rosary. The rosary is much more than a devotion. It is a deep contemplation that introduces us to the life of Christ, to the mysteries that give meaning to our own existence. Each story is a step towards healing. Every decade, a bridge between pain and hope. And as history has recorded, from the silences of conventions to the cheers on battlefields, this humble prayer has created miracles that defy explanation. In our hour of greatest need, the Rosary remains what it has always been: refuge, ardor, light in the midst of the storm. The strength of the Rosary is not in its complexity, but in its simplicity. It opens the soul to mystery, allowing each person, regardless of their education or condition, to enter the divine presence. In his serene reflections, Francis returns from time to time to this truth. The simplest prayer can be the stairway to heaven. In his last days, he carried this certainty like a lit flame. Francis recognized that the story resembled the announcement given at Fatima, where Mary warned of a world in danger if Russia consecrated her Immaculate Heart. His words spoke of wars, persecutions, and errors that would spread like fire to the nations. During the 20th century, these dark prophets took shape in concrete events: The rise of communism, the silencing of hunger in many corners of the world, the cold dominance of oppressive ideologies. During these years, many pontiffs made consecrations, but many did not know if they had truly fulfilled this request from heaven. Then, in 1984, John Paul II made a consecration that many consider decisive. Shortly after, the walls began to collapse. The Iron Curtain weakened, the Berlin Wall was breached, and the Cold War ended. For those who perceive divine signs, this was no coincidence. It was the result of prayer, the echo of a consecration that marked the course of history. Mary's message remains as clear today as it was then. He taught that peace will not come from political agreements or armed armies, but from a renewed heart. The true origin of war, he says, is sin. And that is why the remedy is not treaties, but conversion. The rosary, then, is nothing more than a repetition and becomes a weapon of light. In a time when moral foundations are collapsing under the weight of relativism and materialism, when so many souls feel hesitant and pathless, this ancient prayer shines again. Direct concerns to God, offering them not easy solutions, but the peace that comes. The consecration to the Immaculate Heart is not just a symbol, it is an act of trust, a decision to leave behind the illusions of the world and draw closer to divine mercy. In his liturgies and messages, Pope Francis often returns to this theme, not with extremes, but with the insistence of a shepherd who knows the way back. He called the Rosary the prayer of the simple, of the forgotten, of those who have little but who give everything. And in this poverty of spirit there remains immense strength. It is not surprising to consider the Fatima messages not as nearby relics, but as a living guide for the Church today. Look at the three shepherds, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta. In their innocence, they understood what many adults still reject, that prayer and sacrifice are not burdens, but paths that lead us to grace. They responded with complete entrance to Mary's call, offering their pain and their penance for the healing of the world. His testimony only belongs to the past. It is a reflection that challenges us today. Even the smallest offerings, if united to God, gain eternal value. Fatima's voice is not an echo of yesterday, but a living joy that resonates today. The destiny of humanity is decided in the silences of the soul, in hallucinations, in internal battles that no one sees. This is not a superstition, it is a spiritual truth. Prayer and the act of consecration are not empty gestures, but living pacts that unite us to the plains of heaven. In these volatile times when fear is widespread and the truth is in doubt, they remain our refuge. Mary's heart will triumph, he said. But the question remains, will we be part of this triumph? Fatima's messages are not just warnings, but urgent and sacred invitations. Since the first appearance in 1917, the Lord, clothed in light, has indicated a danger greater than bombs or famine. The loss, in fact, the spiritual error that occurs when souls turn away from God. Mary did not come to raise fear, but to awaken consciences. His voice is slow but firm. He calls the world not to rules, but to a relationship, a living relationship with God. And yet, the question remains, who listens to it? In the midst of the pressure to move forward, the modern soul forgets about eternity. In the search for consolation, the heart endures. Spirituality is relegated as something irrelevant, and man builds on wet soils. That's why his words cut through the noise. It responds to the deepest need of the human being. Not success, but salvation. There is a battle that is not visible, and it is for our souls. At Fatima, Mary revealed the greatness of the struggle. He spoke of sin, not as an old-fashioned idea, but as the most serious idea in life. It heralded moral collapse and a society that would demand freedom from what is evil. And all this, unfortunately, happened. But his voice did not fade. She continues to offer the path, prayer, penance, and return. Awakening the mind requires courage. It doesn't happen automatically. It is a decision that is renewed every day. And this decision is not just for those who have moved. Mary also addressed her words to the church. Apostasy, this silent abandonment from within, was one of the most serious threats he mentioned. The call to conversion is not exclusive to the prodigal son. It also addresses the pride of each Sunday, the catechism, the priest. In this hour, heaven does not call us to consolation, but to clarity, courage, and holiness. Many believers advance in life only on the surface of their actions, according to external rites that never touch the soul. It was this spiritual lukewarmness that Francis denounced with concern, considering it one of the most serious threats to the vitality of the Church. He understood, as his final reflections showed, that the message of Fatima is not a footnote to history, but a present invitation to experience a deeper communion with God. Francis firmly believed that prayer without transformation was only a shadow of the truth, and that the gospel should be lived with passion, not formality. The spiritual struggle announced in so many Marian apparitions is not hidden, but rather comes to light. We live in a time when it is no longer easy to distinguish good from evil, where moral confusion spreads like snow over all nations. Ideologies contrary to the heart of the gospel are no longer subtle, they are dominant, and with them a new wave of hostility toward the event, direct and indirect, that is putting pressure on communities everywhere. In the midst of this uncertainty, hearts become restless. Many seek answers in systems and philosophies that promise instant reconciliation, but leave the soul empty. However, the voice of the Virgin continues to reach us, serene but firm. The way is not in human structures, but in communion with the divine. Only God can reorganize our lives and restore the balance that the world so desperately needs. And this restoration does not begin with the masses, but with the conversion of each person. Each soul that goes towards the light becomes a beacon for the others. Mary's request was simple but profound. Pray the rosary every day. This daily practice is not just a protection, it is an intercession, an acclamation from the world of an open heart. The rosary is not just words. It is a slow walk through the mysteries of salvation, an intimate look at the life of Christ and his mother. And in this look, the heart is transformed. Through the rosary, the world is not only present before God, but it begins to change. But prayer alone is not the entire invitation. Mary also asked for sacrifice, a word that is often misunderstood today. In our time, sacrifice is associated with a loss or pain that must be avoided. However, it shows us another reality. When sacrifice is born of love, it has redemptive power. Unite our pain with the suffering of Christ and allow us to participate in his wild work. This sacrifice can take various forms. Renounce selfishness, bequeath the weight of the other, bear the pain with patience, or fight against the sin that we carry inside. What Fatima offers us is not just a warning, but a light. Mary does not announce a distant or abstract victory, but rather a victory in process, where hearts go towards God. This triumph is not his alone. We are called to be part of it, to take it with us to the places where we live, work, and fight. In each moment of entry, in each irritating gesture, the triumph of his immaculate heart begins anew. This awakening of faith is not a secondary option. This is the key to the renewal of the world. The call is grateful. The time is now. In recent days, Pope Francis has often spoken of the need for the Church to awaken its mission, encourage believers to break out of comfortable routines, and bring hope to the streets, to the marginalized, to those who have forgotten how to hope. This mission clearly reflects the call of Fatima. Mary asks us to live the gospel without fear or shame, even when we encounter opposition or rejection. The battle is real, and so is the promise. We are facing a decisive turning point in the spiritual history of humanity. Fatima's words are not close echoes. They are living hope that still extinguishes the arms of faith in those of us who are willing to listen. Each of us is called, not to be a spectator, but to get up, to get out of the inertia of habit, to leave behind the paralysis of the sleeping soul, and to live fully again in God. The time has come. The decision is before us. In these sacred days of pain, as the world remains silent in prayer, hearts in every corner of the planet turn to the memory of Pope Francis, not only as a pontificate, but as a humble pastor whose life was the inevitable gateway of compassion and hope. His voice was never a noise, but a gentle persistence, like a river that patiently shapes stone. In every homily, in every embrace of the poor, in every visit to a forgotten corner of the world, he reminded us that the church is not a fortress, but a field hospital, open to the burned, to those who doubt and to those who are tired. And now that voice has been extinguished, not because of defeat, but because of plenitude, because Francis believed, as he said so many times, that to die in the service of love is to enter into the whole of life. Let us remember him not only as Bishop of Rome, but also as a father who knew how to make room at the table for everyone, both believers and those who seek. He intended to expand the church to the streets, where pain cries out and where Christ remains crucified every day. He traveled with refugees, washed the feet of prisoners, cried with the victims of war, and never tired of announcing the mercy of God. His pontificate was not based on honors or power, but on volunteerism, tranquility, peace, and purity of heart. He taught us to see the face of Christ in others, especially in the faces of the forgotten. Today, as the campaigns of St. Peter resound and the fire rises to the sky, those who remain are called to continue what he so faithfully embodied. He once said, "Life grows when it is sent away and enclosed in isolation and comfort." And that's how he lived, giving without conditions, without calculations. His legend is not carved in stone, but in the souls he touched, in the hands he opened, in the hearts he saved. We, the church he loved so much, now carry the torch he held high. Let us pray, then, with a reverence that spans generations. Lord of all compassion, receive your servant Francisco in the pleasure he longed for. He crowns his poverty with the riches of heaven. Look at it now with the light that it patiently tried to reflect through our clouds. May the angels take him to paradise, where the saints will receive him with open arms and the Blessed Virgin will say to his spirit, "You have done well, Son of Peace." And let us pray, not only for his soul, but also for ourselves, so that we may be worthy of the example that he left us. May we also walk with the forgotten. May we also speak the truth in love. May we also proclaim Christ's life more than words. In his memory, may our divisions be transformed into dialogue, our fear into courage, and our indifference into action. It is not just a moment of silence, it is a moment of gratitude, testimony, and mission. Light your candle at home. Gather with others for remembrance. Pray a rosary in his honor. Pay attention to the Blessed Virgin and offer her for the rest of your soul. And above all, may what he predicted live. May his death not be the end of a chapter, but the awakening of a call, clear, urgent, and full of light. Give him, Lord, eternal rest and make perpetual light shine for him. May his soul and the souls of all the proud departed, by the mercy of God, remain in peace. Amen. If this tribute to the life and legacy of Pope Francis touched your heart, we invite you to share your opinion in the comments. Perhaps you have a memory, a prayer, or a word of gratitude for the man who reminded us that mercy is the call of the gospel. Your voice counts. If you found comfort or inspiration in this reflection, consider sharing it with someone who needs a word of hope today. And if you want to join us as we continue to explore stories of faith, healing, and renewal, we invite you to subscribe to this channel. Let us keep alive together the spirit of compassion, humility, and courage that Francis so magnificently embodied. May peace be with you always.